Let's lock in. This is a topic where Edexcel A level is basically turning you into a strength and conditioning coach. So you need to understand how to test performance, how to interpret the data, and then how to train the right components of fitness using the right methods, the right intensities, and recovery strategies for sprint, endurance, and intermittent sports. So, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to do three things confidently: choose and describe appropriate fitness tests and thresholds, interpret results, and turn them into a training decision, and then build a training approach using principles of training, intensity calculations, periodization, technology, and recovery. So let's dive straight into preparation and training methods. So what is this really about? Preparation and training methods are all the practical tools that we use to keep someone improving instead of just burning out and getting tired. So preparation includes planning, knowing how to train, selecting training methods for different fitness components, preparing for special environments such as altitude, heat, humidity, and recovering properly so adaptations happen. Training methods include how you train, whether it's training aerobic fitness, anaerobic fitness, strength, power, speed, flexibility, sport specific fitness, agility, so on and so forth. Now let's look at fitness tests and thresholds. So this is where Edexcel wants you to know what the tests measure, how they are carried out, and when they are appropriate. First, what is a threshold? A threshold is a point where the body's response changes noticeably. The threshold, sometimes known as the anaerobic threshold. So as exercise intensity rises, lactate begins to accumulate faster in the body. Lactate threshold is the intensity where lactate rises above baseline and it just keeps increasing. It's linked to endurance performance because it helps to define the highest pace that you can sustain for a long time. Now, you need to handle the term anaerobic threshold carefully because some courses use anaerobic threshold to mean the point where lactate accumulates rapidly. So in your answers, you want to explain it properly. Explain it as the point where anaerobic contribution increases sharply and lactate rises quickly. And you want to link it to sustainability of pace or sustainability of the effort. Next, we have maximal steady state or maximal lactate steady state, MLSS. This is the highest intensity that you can maintain where lactate production and lactate removal stay balanced. So basically, yes, your body is producing lactate, but it's also removing lactate at the same rate. Therefore, lactate does not keep increasing. And this is closely linked to endurance performance and training zones. Next, we have functional threshold or functional threshold power slash pace. This is a practical real world threshold that is often used in endurance sports, especially in running and cycling. And it represents a high sustainable intensity used to set training zones and is based on performance in a time trial type kind of test instead of a test in the lab where they take lactate samples. Gas analysis. This is lab testing where the athlete wears a mask and then we measure oxygen consumption or VO2, carbon dioxide production or VCO2, and ventilation. It's used for estimating VO2 max, which is the maximal oxygen uptake. It's also used for identifying ventilatory threshold, which is similar to the lactate threshold in terms of it's the upper limit of basically how much you can ventilate, and it links to obviously intensity and pace. The more intensity and pace increases, the more you're gonna need to ventilate. And it's also used for measuring energy costs and economy. The strength of this, though, is that it's very accurate and objective, but the limitation is that it's expensive, it's based in a lab, and it's not always sports specific. The bleep test or the beep test or the multi-stage fitness test measures aerobic fitness or aerobic power and the ability to keep working as speed increases. The way it works is you have 20-meter shuttles, and then the speed increases at each level. Basically, you're running in between the shuttles, that 20-meter distance, and the speed is increasing progressively, and then you stop when you can't keep up, and then the score is calculated. So the beep test is best for games players and people who want to test general aerobic fitness. Its limitation is that turning ability affects the score, because you are obviously going back and forth. You have to turn, and that's going to affect the score a little bit. Also, motivation matters. If your motivation is low, you might not do very well. And also, it's not sport specific for straight line sports. Next, we have step tests. Step tests estimate cardiovascular fitness using a step and a heart rate response. It measures sub-max aerobic fitness and recovery. The positives, the strength, is that it's cheap, safe, and is good for the general population. The limitation is that you obviously have to have good technique, have good leg strength, and stepping rhythm can affect results. So if you have bad rhythm, then your results won't be accurate. Next, we have yo-yo tests. Yo-yo tests are made for intermittent sports. Yo-yo tests measure the ability to repeatedly perform high-intensity shuttles with recovery. And why it matters? It matters for sports like rugby, football, hockey, because these performers must sprint, recover, again and again and again. Cooper 12-minute run test. The Cooper 12-minute run test measures aerobic endurance, and it can help to predict VO2 max. And the way it's done is basically run as far as possible in 12 minutes. The strength, the positive obviously, is that it's very simple. You can set it up in a field. Limitation is that motivation can affect accuracy, and the weather and surface can also influence performance. The Wingate test. So this is a test where you go 30 seconds all out cycling against heavy resistance. And this measures anaerobic power and anaerobic capacity. Outputs often include peak power, mean power, and a fatigue index. The strength of the Wingate test is that it's good for anaerobic performance and to build an anaerobic profile. The limitation is that you need lab equipment, and it's only specific for cycling. Next, we have MAOD, which is maximal accumulated oxygen deficit. So this is a concept that is used to estimate anaerobic contribution by comparing predicted oxygen demand at a supramax intensity versus actual oxygen uptake. Supramax basically means any level of physical exertion or intensity where you are operating above the body's maximum aerobic capacity. The deficit in MAOD, maximal accumulated oxygen deficit, reflects anaerobic energy contribution. This is a very advanced concept, so it's worth maybe rewatching the video again, going to the Super PE online platform just to get really familiarized with this concept and doing more research on this. And also in exams, you don't want to overcomplicate it because it's already complicated. So define it simply as a way to estimate anaerobic contribution when intensity exceeds VO2 max capacity, and also link it to high intensity performance. Next, we have RAST, running based anaerobic sprint test, and this is basically repeated short sprints. It's usually 6 sets of 35-meter sprints with short rest in between, and this measures anaerobic power and fatigue. It's useful because it's running based, so it's more sport specific than, for example, a Wingate test, and it can be useful for runners and games players. Next, we have sprint tests, jump tests, agility tests, and strength tests. Let's start with sprint tests. So sprint tests are usually under 100 meters. So we have the 10 meters, which is basically measuring acceleration. We've got 30 meter sprint, which is measuring acceleration and transition. And then we've got 60 meter sprint, which is for speed endurance. So they obviously measure speed, acceleration, speed, endurance, depending on the distance, as I've just listed. Next, we have jump tests. The vertical jump test is measuring explosive leg power. Standing long jump test is measuring horizontal power. Next, we have Cunningham and Faulkner test. This is a treadmill test at a fixed high speed or incline until exhaustion. And this measures anaerobic capacity, often used to assess high intensity tolerance. Next, we have the Magaria-Kalamen test. This is sprinting upstairs, and it's based on time and the vertical height that you cover. This measures anaerobic alactic power. Next, we have strength tests, which are the 1 rep max test, the dynamometer, grip strength tests, and isometric tests. Next, we have agility tests. You can have the Illinois agility test or the T test. Remember, always match the test to the sport's demand. Edexcel expects you to do more than list tests. You must handle the results like a coach. Step 1, interpret the results. So this is asking questions like, is it high or low compared to norms or previous testing? What does it suggest the athlete's strengths and weaknesses are? Step 2, present the result clearly. You can use tables, graphs, bar charts, line graphs on all of that. Step 3, make a training decision. For example, for a low yo-yo score in a footballer, you can turn that into a decision where you would obviously want to focus on intermittent endurance conditioning. If a performer has high strength but low power, you can turn that into a training decision to add plyometrics or add some Olympic lifting. If a performer has poor agility because maybe you did a T test or an Illinois test, then you can train that into a training decision to have more change of direction drills and SAQ drills. Next, you need to know what actually determines performance. So we're going to look at the determinants of performance based on sprinting, endurance, and intermittent performance. For sprint performance determinants, we've got acceleration ability, which is basically putting force into the ground, stride length and stride frequency balance, ground contact time, power and rate of force development, technique. So the technique when it comes to your posture, your knee drive, the arm action, muscle fiber profile. Having more type 2 muscle fibers are obviously going to help, and neural factors as well, like coordination and reaction time. For endurance performance determinants, we've got VO2 max, which is your ceiling for aerobic power. We've got lactate threshold slash MLSS, which is how much of VO2 max can be sustained. We've got running economy, which is your energy cost at a given speed. We've got pacing strategy and psychological tolerance, which is basically like willpower. And we've got efficiency of ventilation and circulation. For intermittent performance determinants, we've got aerobic base for recovery between sprints. This is probably even more important for games players like football and basketball. We've got repeated sprint ability, buffering and lactate tolerance, agility, change of direction, and decision making under fatigue. Now let's look at the components of fitness. These are the definitions that you must know on the screen. And there's some more definitions here. Principles of training, we've got specificity, progressive overload, reversibility, individual needs, and FIT, FIT. TT, which stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. These are all very self-explanatory as well. Now let's look at measuring and calculating intensity. This part really separates the best answers from the average answers. One measure is the percentage of 1 rep max, and this measure is used for resistance training intensity. For higher loads, it's obviously going to be a higher percentage because this is measuring strength. For lighter loads, it's going to be a lower percentage, as using lighter loads would be used for training endurance or speed work. Another measure of intensity is RPE, or the rate of perceived exertion. So this is like subjective perception of how you feel you have exerted yourself. So this could be you've done a few sets of an exercise and someone is like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard was that? You might say a 5, 6, 7, or whatever. That is RPE. That is a rate of perceived exertion based from the performer. And this is useful when heart rate might be unreliable, maybe due to heat or stress. And even though it's subjective, it's practical still. Another measure of calculating intensity is the percentage functional threshold. This is used in endurance sports, and basically it uses training zones based on power slash pace. Next, we've got target heart rate and HRR, which stands for heart rate recovery, which is basically a measure of how quickly your heart rate slows down after exercise. Next, we've got work to rest ratios, which is just very simple. It's a way of sort of controlling the intensity of a session. Obviously, if you're using short rests, then that's going to place more metabolic stress on the performer, and longer rest periods is going to result in higher quality of the sets of exercise. So there's going to be high quality power and speed production. Now let's look at Carvenen's theory, which helps to measure target heart rate using heart rate recovery. Carvenen is like the cleanest exam method because it's very personalized to the performer, and we're gonna see why. So the step-by-step Carvenen method is step 1, gonna estimate heart rate max or maximum heart rate. Step 2, we're gonna measure heart rate at rest. Step 3, we're gonna measure heart rate recovery, and step 4, we're gonna measure target heart rate. And you can see we've got all of the formulas that you need on the screen. So if you remember, not too long ago we looked at the maximum heart rate formula, which is 220 minus your age. So if we use an example here of a 20-year-old, their maximum heart rate is going to be 220 minus 20, which will give us 200 beats per minute. And then if we measure their heart rate at rest, just when they're sitting down, not exercising, we can calculate how many times their heart beats in a minute. And let's say that gives us 60 beats per minute. And then we can use the heart rate max and the heart rate at rest to measure the heart rate recovery, which will be 200 minus 60, which will give us 140 beats per minute. And then we can use all of that to measure the target heart rate at, let's say, 70% of exercise intensity, and that would be the heart rate at rest, which is 60 plus percentage intensity times heart rate recovery, which is 0.7 times 140. If we put that all together, we get 158 beats per minute. And this basically means if we're training at 70% of our max intensity, then we should be training at around 158 beats per minute. Now let's look at contemporary technologies to monitor fitness and performance. Some examples that you can use: obviously heart rate monitors, smartwatches, GPS vests, power meters, force plates, lactate analyzers, video analysis, apps as well to like track sleep, track load, track wellness, and data dashboards for coaches. So the key exam words that you really want to be focusing on when you're talking about these technological tools is talking about how they improve accuracy, they improve validity, reliability, objectivity, but also discuss the costs, privacy issues, maybe data overload, and the technological skills as well, because some people might not be tech savvy to actually interpret what is going on with these tools. Periodization is organizing training into phases to allow the performer to peak at the right time. We've got macrocycle, mesocycle, and microcycle. These are three different phases of periodization. Macrocycle is more of a long-term plan over the course of a season or a year. Mesocycle is a medium-term plan or a medium block over the course of weeks, months as well. Microcycle is the shortest block, the short-term plan, which is over the course of a week. So in your training, your microcycle might be, this week I'm going to have 3 sessions and I'm going to do so and so and so in these sessions. Your mesocycle might be, in the next 8 weeks, 12 weeks, I'm going to be doing these types of things. And then your macrocycle might be, okay, over the course of this season, I'm going to focus on this. And then maybe next year or next season, I'm going to slightly change it and focus on something else. And so we have 3 phases that you need to know as well. We've got the preparation phase, which is where the athlete will be working on general sort of aerobic base, general strength levels, mobility as well, and we'll be working on sport specific intensity and speed / power. We've got the competition phase, which is in season, which is where performers obviously want to maintain fitness, work on tactics and strategy, and making sure that they are managing fatigue. And lastly, we've got the transitional phase, which is towards the end of the season, where performers are going to engage in active rest, active recovery, and basically resting and rebuilding again, preparing for the next season to come on. We've also got some key terms like tapering and peaking. Tapering is basically where you reduce training load just before a major event takes place to basically allow your body to recover properly so that you can give your all and give your best in the upcoming performance. And peaking is basically when you time your best performance for competition. Methods of training. Edexcel expects you to match methods of training to activities. So we're going to begin with aerobic methods. We've got continuous training, fartlek training, interval training, and cross training. The definitions of all of these are on the screen for you as well. Flexibility methods, we've got static stretching, ballistic stretching, and PNF. PNF stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, and that is basically where you stretch a specific body part muscle to the max, and then you hold it, you take a deep breath, you relax, and then you stretch it further again into the stretch. And it basically, not to go into too much detail, but it all has to do with the Golgi tendon organ, and it basically bypasses the stretch reflex that your muscle has. Basically, you're going to the edge of the stretch, you're contracting it, holding it, taking a deep breath, and then pushing even further than that. Then for strength and power methods, we've got weights, could be free weights, could be machines. We've got elastic resistance bands, we've got plyometrics, and functional stability. Methods for training speed and agility, we've got assisted training, resisted training, and SAQ. So when you're talking about these methods, you always want to evaluate their advantages and their disadvantages, and these are some key general points that will always apply to most of these methods. As you can see on your screen, for advantages, you got specificity, how well it transfers to performance, and how well the progress can be measured. For the disadvantage, you can always use injury risk, because every single type of exercise and training always comes with a risk of injury, obviously risk of fatigue. Some methods might require coaching or spotting, and some methods might not be suitable for all performers, like older performers or younger performers, or performers with disabilities, or performers with low levels of motivation, and so on and so forth. So this gives you a wealth of information to help you to evaluate suitability for different types of performers. How do you prepare for performance at altitude, at heat, or in humidity? That's exactly what we're about to look at. So at altitude, what is going on? There is less oxygen available, which reduces aerobic performance initially. Keyword initially, because over time you can get acclimatized to it. So acclimatization, which is where your body gets adapted to the altitude, improves tolerance and can increase red blood cell count and hemoglobin levels over time. Pacing and recovery must be adjusted early as well. For heat and humidity, dehydration and overheating risk increases, obviously, and humidity reduces sweat evaporation, which makes it harder for your body to cool down. So the strategies to combat these impacts is obviously being acclimatized, which you can do by gradually exposing yourself to these environments, planning your hydration and taking enough electrolytes, cooling strategies like using ice towels, using shades and pre-cooling, having the appropriate clothing, and pacing slash intensity adjustments, and recognizing any symptoms early, such as dizziness, confusion, cramps, and so on and so forth. Now let's look at recovery and speeding up recovery after exercise. Recovery is where adaptation happens, and these are some recovery strategies for you to know, as you can see on your screen. Okay, thank you for watching. That is it for this video. These are some quick recap questions for you to test yourself. If you can't answer any of them, then feel free to rewatch the video to get the answer from the video. But if you can answer all of these very easily, then that means you're off to a great start to mastering this topic. If you want to do more practice, more exam questions, flashcards, learning aids, whatever you name it, then check out our platform, Super PE Online, the best PE platform in the world. And I'll see you in the next video.